my first official bike was, I actually bought the bike just down the road here in about
Moose's?
No, long before then.
Yeah, okay.
About 4 doors down. I just can't remember the name of the store, but it was actually Daryl Kay. And I bought
no way.
Yeah, bought a Mongoose, I don't even know what, an iBox something.
Yep.
And it was really early. That's just as XT was sort of just coming out.
Yep.
Above bars.
The dual control things.
Yep.
And
Yep. So that was, sometime in the late 80s or something like that. So that was my first bike. But previous to that, I'd lent a couple of bikes. I'd lent the Shogun off a guy, it looked like the Coca-Cola.
Prairie Breaker or something.
Something like that, I can't remember. So I was riding some mates' bikes and stuff like that, and they were great. But they were, to me, I came from a background, I was at a school, I just went to school up here at Ferntree Gully Tech, being here in Ferntree Gully, and running to me was everything, because it was cheap, it was easy to do, and I was actually pretty good at it, I guess. Won a few school Australian championships and stuff like that in cross country running.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, I was a runner forever. I've done 37 marathons.
So all your knees are so flogged out.
Exactly what it is. But on the other side of the coin, I was a bit like Happy Gilmore. Like I wanted to be a motocross rider, and I wasn't that good at it. Well, didn't have the material to do it either, because I was riding 80s and stuff while all my mates were riding 125s and stuff. So I was a motocross rider, but I was actually really good at enduro that I worked out later. So I took all the running I was doing, and I ran for a long time, and enduro, and combined them and found mountain biking.
Yeah, okay.
And the way I found mountain biking was mid-80s. We used to go to Eildon a lot. And we used to go to Jews Creek and have houseboats and do whatever, and we all learnt to ski and do whatever else we did. But we went there one day, and I had a couple of mates of mine, one mate named Brian Gray, and he goes, no, we're going to set up a triathlon. I'm like, what the hell's a triathlon? So you had to swim across, I think it was Big River Arm. So you had to swim across Big River Arm. We had 3 bikes that were mountain bikes, as they were then, with the triple one-piece handlebar.
One-piece bars and the quill stems.
So we knew where the course was, we knew all that sort of was, and we're all kind of fitness guys. We didn't smoke. We really didn't drink that much. Guys tried to drink, but they would just fall over. Shit at it. So we had this triathlon thing. We said, we'll try that. So you had to swim across his arm, but it was about 400 metres across one side and 400 metres the other way. And I actually won that a couple of times, and I worked out why.
You're pretty good at swimming.
And the reason why is because it was full of brown snakes. Now, have you ever seen a brown snake swim?
They're pretty good at it.
They are really good at swimming. They can go on top and under the water. And then the first time I seen one, while I was swimming, because you're at eye level, I'm like, holy shit. And they can actually swim pretty quick. So I did that. And then we did the bike leg. And I had, touch wood, never ridden a bike since I'd finished my paper round, when I was in grade 6 or whatever.
Yep.
So I jumped on a bike and, I was riding my bike. And of course, because the swim was so long, I just rode to the top of the ridge, across the top, and he came up a fire road, down and back again.
Yep.
And then we did the run, and I smashed him in the run, and they get back and they go, no, something's wrong here. You've cheated. I said, what do you mean you've cheated? And they're going, look, we understand we could see in the swim, we see in the run, but your times on the bike are bullshit. They're not possible. So we end up having a bike race, and I could just climb so much quicker than the other guys. I don't know why. And descending, that's what I did. So it was really good. And then there's big arguments broke out. I'm like, I didn't cheat, guys. Come on. They're like, bullshit artist, blah, blah. So one thing led to another. One of the guys said, you take my bike, we're going to race next week. I'm like, I've never done a race in my life. No, let's go along and do it. So I borrowed my mate's bike and went along, and I think they had expert back then, they called pro, and then I went into the next category because I'd never ridden a bike before, and I won it by miles, it didn't matter. And I enjoyed it, and then I got talked into buying a bike, which I did. I bought it from Daryl Kay just down the road here, with a big help. And then he also said, hey, I should show you some trails. So he lived just up the road here, and he showed me back then through Sherbrooke, which was the unknown territory. I lived here most of my life, and I'd never been through there. It was awesome to see all these trails and being able to ride them and up and down stairs and stuff. So that's how I found my way into riding, and racing sort of came along a little bit later. But I was always quite competitive, but when I realised that I couldn't run anymore because my knees were so bad, and motorbikes were so expensive, meaning you had to load them on the trailer and replace the bike every year.
There's always a lot of money involved with the weekend.
Well, remember, you just ride the car and off you go. So that was all good. No, I had a very, very physical job back then. I was a rigger crane operator. So to ride my bike was actually a relief. And then I actually started, of all things, riding to work and back, which I worked in the city. So I was doing tower cranes or doing whatever.
Big Ks,
so I started doing Ks. Basically, so I wasn't having my motorbike or my car in the city in dodgy parking spots or anything like that, and it was easy for me to get around. It was actually quicker because back then, I mean, I'm talking a lot of back then, but there was no Monash Freeway. It stopped at Springvale Road and started again in Toorak Road, and it was only a single lane and no traffic flow.
Forever to get through. Yeah,
so that was my challenge. A lot of my mates lived here, so I would beat them in and beat them back. Yeah, so it was a pretty good thing. And then we worked at Toyota in Altona as well, and I could actually ride home to Furniture Gully quicker than they could drive. And they were using the Westgate and I wasn't. So it was really, really cool. So yeah, that's how I kind of got into it. And then I kind of got talked into doing some racing, and I'm talking early racing, you know, the range, which we now know as Warramate. We're talking the backside of it. When Fat Tire Flyers were getting going, and they were really, really good. The Jamison brothers were running a lot of that, and some other really influential people were starting it. And it was kind of the birth of mountain biking in early 90s, I guess. And then, you know, we're starting to see these magazines come out, mountain bike magazines, and there was Australian Mountain Bike magazine and Bicycling magazine, and I'm looking at these guys going, oh wow, you know, Graham Orbond and Werner Walrab and all these guys. There's some pretty big names. Yeah, well, we at that stage weren't getting the US. We're just about the next year, 1991, when I started to learn about the overseas stuff. You know, with Ned and Tomac and all these guys and stuff. And then I guess Cycling Australia. Started racing mountain biking, probably late 90s, 99. I think the first Australian Championship might have been 89, and then I raced it in 1990 and then continued on after that. But
yeah, you did a whole heap straight in a row, didn't you? Like, how many times did you take out number one?
For cross country, I did that 3 times.
Yeah.
But I've been arrogant now, I probably should have done it more because I made some mistakes in the early days, like getting off my bike, carrying a water bottle on the last lap, and having a few hundred metres to go, and I didn't realise, I just didn't care, I was just riding my bike. So, Vince Flanagan beat me by doing that, and he did a great job, but I'm not sure he's ever going to beat me again after that, which he didn't. But then mountain biking got a lot more professional, where we went to Thredbo and they had dedicated trails they'd built and all sorts of stuff, and it was really, really good times. And, when I started, of course, the same rider did the same thing on the same bike.
Yep.
So we went to
you were doing cross country and downhill on the same bike?
Well, you had to ride to the top of the downhill because there was no shuttles. So unless it was Thredbo, so you would ride to the top, but you'd race it. So you'd have arm warmers on, or you'd take them off to ride the uphill, and you'd put them back on to ride the downhill on the same bike. You might
OG enduro.
That's what it was. That's what it was. So you do all that, and then you get to the bottom and you do your cross country. And cross countries back in the day were a long way. They were a minimum 2.5 hour race. They were big races.
I remember doing my first one, and I hated it. I thought it was never going to end.
Where was that?
It was in Bendigo at Malden.
Whoa. Yeah, because there's a lot of rock and it's very open. Where I'm used to riding in the Dandenongs in the high country. And it was a little bit cooler as well. And I love the loam.
The Hero Dirt.
I was riding a GT, but we were riding like a 1.9 tyre, was considered a big tyre back then. Now people are just
like
laughing.
Like an Tioga Psycho or something like that, wasn't it?
I think I was riding a ground control on the front, and I'd run an IRC on the rear, so you'd run a really skinny one, a 1.5 on the rear, and a 2.0, 1.9 on the
theory,
front.
wasn't it?
Yeah, so, but when mountain biking became a bit more professional and we had these magazines, I decided, hey, I should have a look at this. And I got a sponsorship off Mongoose. That was my first real sponsor.
Yeah.
I had a couple of bike shops. I had PRM, which was great. Pat Dillon, yeah. He sent me a photo just the other day, actually, of the old days. And then Tony Birchall at the old Streamline Cycles down there in Noble Park. And he was my mechanic and worked really well. And then, I was at Mongoose. The distributor wasn't serious about the brand back then. They promised a lot of things, delivered very little.
Atlas,
but I was the first person in the country, I mean, I shouldn't say this, but to get XDR, and the magazines were ringing my house and coming to my house, and the Shimano guys back then were coming to look at this stuff because they hadn't even had it and I had it on 2 samples, racing it, riding it, enjoyed it. It worked great because it was a big step up from the thumb shifters or the push or whatever that stuff. It worked really well, but from then on after that I got noticed by a gentleman named Graham Southcott, and he owned Southcott Cycles, and Dad just picked up the distribution of GT off Brian Pearce, who was the distributor of the BMX stuff. And they said, hey, we're serious, we want to start up a team. And, I spoke to Graham and I believed him, and he got me from very little early days. Like I gave up 2 XDR iBox Pros for 1 Zaskar,
Yep.
with the promise the more I did, the better I would get.
The more they'd lay on you, yeah.
Straight away I got on the bike. I loved it. You know, it was like a truck on the downhill. You just pointed and it went, and it was a very good unfair advantage for me. You know, because I was the only one on GT. Well, Graham Orbon was just at the end of his scene, and he never really raced downhill anyway. But you know, when I mixed it all up, that bike was really, really good and reliable. And from there on, I was able to build a team around me or around the team, and you know, the bikes just kept coming. The early 90s was GT's heydays, you know, with...
it absolutely was,
Zaskar, Shazang, RTS, LTS, the Boomerang, the Lobo. It just went crazy through there. And, you know, when we rolled up, people knew that they were going to have to be on their top game to beat our bikes and us.
Yeah.
So it was really good.
It was one of those things, like, I think your actions back then made mountain biking the professional thing it is in Australia, you know, because you had Rob, who was doing everything professional, you know, doing the bikes well, presenting well, and then you had Phil, the Hellman.
Phil Catton.
You know.
Let me tell you about Phil. Look, Phil was great, and he came along, but he put something in the sport. You know, I would call him, this is a bit of credit to Phil, like, he was the Sean Palmer of Australia. He was not interested in pedaling his bike. He was not interested in conforming. He was not interested in rules. He just wanted to ride his bike. He just wanted to make noises and do the biggest jumps and be the biggest dickhead. So we all knew that. But Phil did a great job, and he brought... he was really one of the very first professional downhill-only guys. I mean, sure, there was Ronning and Sharples and Miles Davis and a bunch of other guys, but they were doing a bit of everything. They came from the old school. Phil was not interested in that. You know, if he turned up and had to wear Lycra, he would just blow up. He couldn't do it. So that was 10 years ahead of his time, right?
Yeah, totally.
And Palmer was the first one to come along and wear motorbike nylons and all that sort of stuff. But Phil, you know, he did a great job, and he did well in some races. He couldn't win the big ones.
He's always just off. Yeah, he's always the bridesmaid.
He was. I think some of that was with his product as well. You know, like he was pushing the product way beyond what it was designed.
Yeah,
what it was
totally.
Doing.
Yeah.
You know, where you're running elastomers front and rear on bikes with no rebound. That's a big call. I think we all remember that big crash at Threadbow. I don't think many of us blame Phil for that, but it was good watching him roll around a little bit. And then I came down behind him on full control, so, you know, maybe my bike played a little bit of that part as well, you know. But that was one of the most iconic turns. That was 1992 at Threadbow, where Phil had that massive crash. But there was a bunch of others crash. Ewan Galley, there was a bunch of other guys that could have won that and should have won that, but they didn't. You know, mostly fire roads, a little bit of single track, and then we had that big last ski run that had these water bars, and these water bars was as big as these couches. You imagine hitting those at 60k an hour
with
on
an
a bike
elastomer kicking you up.
Exactly, and that's exactly what happened. So, you know, we learned a lot from that. From 92 is when Tomac might have come out there. It might have been 93, and then Herbold came out, and that got a little bit more professional. And then when I realised that, hey, this world champion guy's coming out, I've got to do my best. And I worked hard. I had some suspension engineers working with me, and I got my bikes well. I was pedaling well. I was best in class, and I could always get better at training for the one-day events. I was good at that at running. I was good at that at motorbike riding. So I taught myself how to do that. But downhilling, it became this enigma that all the cool kids wanted to do it. And
it did, absolutely,
The dorky kids or the skinny lightweights, you know, the book nerds went and did
the cross country.
So, you know, and I just did whatever it is. I just wanted to ride my bike, you know, and riding cross country was a forms to me to find the way to go downhill. And the way I look at racing back in those days, it was two parts of the race. I mean, because we raced in ski resorts mostly, you either went up or you're going down. There wasn't too much time trialling or traversing or whatever we call it. So depending where the finish was, the bullet was always at the top, it was Threadbow was at the bottom, and all I needed to do was teach myself how to ride with the likes of Scott Stewart and Damien Grundy and a bunch of old guys like that. How to stay with them, and then if I was with them at the downhill,
all over, mate.
It was all over. So, you know, they tried all sorts of games like trying to protect lines or whatever, but that never worked
soft
either.
attacks and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. So, you know, when it became specific and we had trails that flowed and, you know, we had specific design trails, I was in my element. You know, I really, really loved it. But then I really worked hard with a couple of coaches and physios to teach me how to ride uphill, teach myself how to ride uphill, teach myself how to hurt, and really enjoyed that in the end. I enjoyed climbing, and I think I could climb with the best in the country
Yeah.
on my day, and I enjoyed it. Still today as a senior road rider, I think I still go okay on the climbs. But
Mate, I know dudes, like Steve Cusworth and all those young cross-country nerds, they panic when they're going out for a ride with you because it's like, Robbie's going to put me in the box. It takes a while to warm up, but once he's on, that is it. He'll just keep going until you're out the back.
Well, depending on the course, depending how I'm feeling. I do have days like that, but like Cusworth and Rowan Adams, they're special guys, right? That's their move. They go uphill quite quick, especially Rowan. He struggles a bit on the downhill, but he's a phenomenal rider.
Pretty
But I guess if
strong,
you Lento beans and stuff like that, you're going to be quite lean and fast, aren't you? Getting back to the mountain biking, I mean, there's so much development in the early 90s that went on to the end of the 90s, and that's where I started to go overseas, and I actually got a contract with Team GT Global to be the international ambassador to the riders. So what happened? We had Team GT, which was Furtado and Steve Peat and Mike King and all these superstars. Funny thing is, they never took any Aussies because we were consistently beating them, like the Kavariks and the Jared Graves and McDougall and Taylor Muxlow. And all these, absolute legends.
Gun riders.
They never went to GT, and there was reason for that. Is because we were beating them on standard bikes, production bikes, and these team guys were having their table tennis bat bikes or their tech shop bikes. They're one-offs, and we were consistently beating them. Especially Chris. Like Chris was phenomenal. I just needed to control him and keep him out of the bar.
Yeah, it's a bit wild, eh? Yeah.
A little bit wild, just a notch down. Maybe not an 11, notch down from Palmer, but he was certainly a 9. But those guys could really ride bikes and phenomenal. So what happened was I was liaison to all the international distributors that bring their stars over, and I would manage and look after those guys after about 96. And we've seen some really good Australians come through, that went on to other brands. And brands like Intense that worked out that, hey, you've got to have an Aussie on your team. If you're not having an Aussie on your team, you're not going to win races.
Although everyone was getting hosed by Australians for a while there, like Rennie as well.
That's right. Yeah. Well, that's right. He went over to Yeti. But the important thing was, if you didn't have an Aussie on your team, you weren't winning, but you weren't having fun. And the Americans were just too serious. They were all about, eyes on the prize. You've got to win. And the Aussies like, the winning didn't matter. That'll come.
How many beers can you drink the night before?
How can I smash this berm? I'm going to get backside on every jump, even if it's not there. And that's what they did. They just rode their bikes for fun. While the other guys were out getting massages and wearing compression, our Aussies were doing skids and trying to roll up walls and do ramps and smashing rental cars. I don't know what they were doing. So they were really good times. When the product developed and the tyres got better. They weren't getting flats. You weren't getting mechanicals. You weren't blaming your bike or being able to blame your bike. That's where you start to see a lot more professional coming in, and that's where guys like Scott Sharples excelled because he could harness these knuckleheads.
He could corral them.
And one of the young kids who who never rode on our product early was Sam Hill. You remember that kid?
I do. I've heard the name.
Came along as a junior, and I mean, he may not want me saying this, but came along as a junior. But his first ever junior world championships, he was this close from being sent home. He got into a bit of misdemeanor. That's when orange cannons were famous, and we were staying at Vale right next to the golf course, and these guys were shooting orange cannons and trying to hit the golfers. Well, anyone played golf in Vale's generally a multi-millionaire, and the police got called twice. They denied it, and in the end, it was quite elaborate what had happened. So Sam, with 2 runs, 1 walk and 1 run under his belt, went out there and got 3rd in his first ever international race. Actually, Ben Corey won that one with all the attention and all the focus on it.
Maniac,
Exactly, but all the juniors were really good. They were all doing really well. I mean, Rennie'd won it the year before. Sam came along and won it consecutive years after that. But Scott was able to harness these guys and go, hey, listen, knucklehead, if you take all that energy and put it into here, you'll be unbeatable. And there was a good period there for 5, 6, 7, 8 years while the funding was there. They were unbeatable. And Scott had a system and did really, really well. There's a bunch of other kids that came along. Troy Brosnan was a little bit later, came a little bit more professional than those guys. But he had the mentor of Sam. He had the mentor of Jared. He could see what was possible. Where on the cross-country side, it was always a little bit tougher. There were some other elements into play there in cross-country. And I'll admit, I went overseas 92 onwards, 93, 94, all the way through. And I just could not get out of bed in US. I don't know what it was. I went to Europe and They were riding on a different level to me. I don't
Yeah.
know what it is. So I think we found out why now they're on a different level to me. I was drinking Gatorade. They were probably
Yeah,
drinking
they probably
something
weren't
else.
just having Wheat Bix for breakfast.
They weren't just
Yeah,
having Wheat
yeah,
Bix for breakfast, and they had their soigneurs and their doctors following around, and all
Yeah.
the rest of it, and all that sort of stuff. So
Yep.
you know.
Doesn't
I
really
don't want to
make
be
for a
too
level
critical.
playing
It is
field.
what it is. There's nothing
Yep.
I can do to change it now. But
Yep.
you know, there's a few of us that woke up to that pretty early and just go, "This is not normal."
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Some Aussies did well and we competed well, but you know, I'm going to say there was not an Aussie out there that was taking the piss like that.
Yeah.
So it was pretty hard days. You know, we obviously had some that did really well. Cadell, you know, Rob Woods did exceptional. But you know, as far as world level, world class, world championships, we were not going to compete because it was.
Well, it all comes back to the fact that the Aussies are just riding their bike. Again, isn't
What
it?
it comes
Like,
back.
yeah,
And we
yeah.
weren't doing it for the big dollar. None
Yeah.
of us were on the big dollar,
Yeah.
so to speak. Some of the downhillers were doing okay, but we were doing it because we wanted to ride bikes.
Yeah.
We wanted to ride bikes and kick some ass and wear the green and gold.
Yeah.
And all that sort of stuff. So, you know, like, I think a lot of countries, you know, New Zealand's pretty similar to us, where, you know, their population's not so big, but those
Yeah.
guys can ride bikes because that's what they do, is
Yeah.
ride bikes. But, you know, you look at US, Canada,
France is
France,
another one,
Spain,
yeah.
or Switzerland. I mean, they're doctored into riding bikes at a young age. You know, they're told you're going to ride.
Oh, mate, if you're
you
a
know.
cyclist over there, the public grovel at your feet.
Yeah, well, exactly right,
Yeah.
exactly right. Like, cycling is definitely mainstream. It's probably number 2 behind soccer.
Yeah.
And mountain biking is up there, especially with the younger generation. You know, because again, they just want to ride bikes. They want to have fun. They want to look up to these guys. And Australia, you know, would definitely be in the top 2-3 countries in the world with a very small population. I mean, back
Yeah,
then we
per
probably
capita,
only had
yeah.
20 million or whatever.
Yep.
And we've got all these champions. Like, how do you do it? Well,
Yep.
after school they're riding their bikes. You
Yep.
know, probably during school they're riding their bikes. But you know, and that was it. And they were eating real good, generally healthy food. They were you know, riding their bikes. And that's all part of the training. You know,
Yeah.
so it's really good. You know, they could jump their bikes. They weren't scared. They
Yeah.
were first to do things. And the American companies in particular really noticed this early, and that's why they put them on. You know, whether it was a Yeti or as I said, Intense or some other brands, they really noticed and they got on top of it. And you know, Trek was another one. They signed both Scott and Michael, and they did quite well for many years. You know?
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
But as we progress through the sport, you know, as we talked about, when I raced, you had one bike did it all.
Yep.
And
It was
then
DIY as, wasn't it? Yeah.
that's right. And then, you know, the sport fractured, you know, like, because I remember 10 years ago, you know, you had to do 24 hours. There's all these 24-hour events, and you bring in these gun teams and do it. And, you know, it seemed like, the sport's dying off. I don't think the sport ever died off. I think the sport got bigger. It just went all over the place. It went to
Spread thin
marathon,
on the
it went to
ground.
cross country, it went to
Yep.
enduro, it went to all this sort of stuff. So unlike, you know, road riding, there's crits and road races, you know, and you know, it's still very small and everyone knew everything. Mountain bikers were all riding in their own forests or their own parks or their own dirt jumps. And they're there, they're still riding and they're still having places. But we went away from, you know, riding one bike with one set of tyres, with one athlete doing all these things to, you know, splintering off to doing downhill bike. You've got to have your marathon bike, you've got to have your lightweight cross-country bike, you've got to have your hardtail, then you've got to have your dirt jump bike. We've kind of morphed back into one bike again.
Back with the enduro thing.
That's exactly what enduro is, you
Yep.
know. And I think we can justify that to now being some new product engineer. And I think the biggest thing for that was probably the dropper seat post. So, you know, you can now have a bike which has got really good quality 4-5 inch suspensions, probably better than some bikes, 7-8.
Pedals beautifully, lightweight.
Really well. And, you know, the Pike was the first one to really do that. And a bike that can pedal uphill very efficiently. The fork is light. It's probably lighter than the cross-country forks I rode back in my day.
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah.
It's 6 inches of
It's huge.
suspension. It flexes nicely. It's not as rigid as a post or anything like that. You've got these dropper posts. You've got really good quality big tyres. You've got really good quality
sizes.
big wheels.
Yep.
And you've got suddenly this bike you can ride with your mates after work. You can ride it on the weekend, or you can go and smash shuttle runs if you wanted to. So now the sport's evolved. It's gone, you know, from really small to way out, and I think it's coming back in and coming back in now. And now that you know, governments have woken up and private promoters have woken up, the ski resorts have woken up, that I don't know if you noticed it, we don't really have snow in Australia that much anymore.
Hasn't happened for a while.
Hasn't happened for a while,
Maybe
So
a
now,
couple of weeks last year, I think.
Yeah, so now they're changing from ski resorts to leisure resorts, which I've been saying for 20 years. America's worked it out, Canada's worked it out, a little place called Whistler worked it out long ago, that you can actually make money in summer. Actually more money. And the venues are great. Everything's there. The hotels are there. The restaurants are there.
Yeah.
You just got to open them up, right?
Yeah.
And people will come. So now you've got this one bike. You've got a group of mates, whether they're your tradie mates, your plumbers, or the guys from work in the office, and you get together and you can go and ride your bike. You know? And I think mountain biking has evolved from your weekend warrior like myself, thinking I'm better than my mates. Let's go and compete against each other. To racing at a World Cup level, or watching this on TV, to the media, to now we're seeing all this on social media that you don't have to pay for.
Yeah.
The opinion's a little bit more unbiased now, I think, with the media, and you can definitely get to ride with your mates anywhere you want. Now, New Zealand, I mean, I got really slammed in the media about 10, 12, 15 years ago. I think it was AMB, thanks those guys, where I said we really don't have any mountain bike trails in this country.
Yeah.
And this is before there was people just writing letters in, oh, Rob Eva, I don't know what he's talking about. I'm like, no. I've just ridden this place called Whistler. No one had heard about it at that stage. And I'd just been to Rotorua, which was just getting going. And I've just been to a place called Macra Peak in Wellington. I've seen this place. And these were custom built. They were roller coasters. They were roller coasters. You could ride your bike. It was so much fun. And I'd come back and I'd ride my local trails. This is before Listerfield was built. They're like kangaroo trails. You've got to throw your bike over a fence. You go, oh, yeah, we'll go down here and cut through this. We're basically
freestyling it the whole way.
We're basically glorified skateboarders or graffiti artists. We were just belting our way through national parks with the rangers following us or whatever. To some extent, we're still doing that in this country. We're getting there. We're getting better.
Yeah, we build the trail, then we ask for forgiveness.
I'd been riding the Dandenongs for 35 years odd. More, if you include motorbikes. But out there now, I think we're still, we've got 15k of legal single track?
Yeah, out at Sylvan.
Sylvan, 15k of single track. We all know there's hundreds of kilometres.
A bit more,
Hundreds and hundreds of kilometres. And they've always been there. They're always going to be there. And this is, for me, it keeps me healthy. It keeps me wanting to get up in the morning and go for a ride with my mates and go and beat them up the uphills and the downhills and stuff. So governments are working it out. Some government departments are slower than others. New South Wales government, Victorian government. Tasmania, have a look what they've done with Derby and Medina and what they did with Wildside. And it's unbelievably good what you can do with a piece of property. And a lot of these country towns are on their knees. These timber towns, like Warburton's another one. That town is on its knees and it's a beautiful place to go to, but there ain't a lot of employment there. And you get all these people pushing back, no, we've got to log it every year. Well, calm down a little bit, just relax a bit, because the money's there, the people are there, people want to go and ride their bike. And we're actually not doing any damage, we're just riding bicycles.
Correct. And if the parks aren't getting used for recreation, then they're not getting used properly.
That's exactly right.
That,
Exactly right. And like I said, I've been riding motorbikes up there since the 70s, 80s, and the trails are there. They're really good fun. I'm just noticing a lot more now using it on my gravel bike or my mountain bike, and all these tram tracks and stuff like that. You know what tram tracks are, right? They're the logging trails that you brought the logs out with. They're all there. We've just got to open them up and let people see them. And all my old buddies are now contacting me again. My buddies from the 80s and 90s are going, oh, I see you're still riding, seeing you on Facebook or Instagram or somewhere. And, hey, we've got to get together. And I'm catching up with my old buddies that I haven't seen for years. And it's amazing. It's amazing to ride with these guys and see these guys and do all this sort of stuff. So it's really, really cool. So, but, like to get back and ride some of these old trails, to get back and ride some of these old trails is really, really cool, right? It's some of the old trails, like we head off the back of Buller, for example, there's some there.
The backcountry stuff,
backcountry stuff. And we're doing that, and they come out at Sheepyard Flats. They're so much fun. You've got to dodge the snakes and you've got to dodge all that sort of stuff.
That's part of the enjoyment of it all, isn't it?
Absolutely.
The adventure.
Absolutely. And that's what we started on, but I'm fortunate enough to, with my job now, I get to travel a bit, so I'll be in New Zealand for Crankworks, and then I might disappear for a few days.
Very often.
No, not as much as I like to, but I do like getting out as well. So, and then another place that's booming as well, a place called South Africa. Now, back then it was you couldn't. It's not like Australia. We got some kangaroos and some koalas, or the odd wombat that might get you.
They've got proper animals, haven't they?
Their cats over there. They'll leave a mark. And so they're riding a lot over there. So the world is embracing. Australia's been slow compared to some places, but the other places, the outlying places, South America, they're really Asia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Philippines. They're really getting into cycling.
Philippines surprisingly is going
really
well.
There's a lot of tour groups. There's a lot of things going on. And my buddies now go for holidays. They take their families and then they'll rack off for the morning or the afternoon. And Mountain biking is absolutely a mainstream sport.
Yep.
It is here to stay. People are getting it. Devoted, dedicated trail building companies.
Yep.
You know, we got some of the best here in this country, and they're building really, really good, sustainable trails that are fun to ride. And you and I look at a trail and we say, "Oh my God, there's a roller coaster. There's a double jump here. And there's a hip there. There's this." And other people look at it and go, "Am I going to be able to ride this trail?" So we need to be somewhere in the middle. You know?
Yeah.
So it's quite good. You know, we've got places like Listerfield, which are great. That's fine. It's not for me. I'd call it 2 out of 10. It's more for your family. But I can see so much potential there. I can see so much potential linking that park to other parks, to Orovale, and then to the backside of the Dandenongs, all the scout camps. And I'm often doing rides up there, you know, all the time. So I've actually found a new sport which has been around a long, long time. In fact, the first ever cycle or bike that was ever built was a gravel bike, I guess, because there was no made roads or anything. So I've taken my road bike, which, you know, as I'm getting older, it's really hard to go mountain biking every day, you know, and go and bust your lung and do that. So now I'm riding a lot of gravel. And that gravel bike I've got is very, very similar to the mountain bike I was riding back in the early 90s. Exactly. Except, you know, I'm riding the bent bars, but they're even still probably wider than the bars we rode back then.
What's old is new.
You're riding a 40 mil tyre, but these bikes, it's just opening up the forest, it's opening up everything. And the best thing about it is getting cyclists off the roads again. You know, I'm riding bike paths, I'm riding at access to get to Plenty Gorge, I'm riding access to get to all these other places. And cycling as a whole is such a lovely sport. It's so good, and there's so many different types of it. And I ride road for a month or two of the year, but you know, once March, April hits in, I'm off the road bike in the Dandenongs. It's just too dangerous. But I'll go and ride Warburton, go and ride over to the catchment areas, go and ride to Marysville, go and ride over to Woods Point. Who would ever think you ride to Woods Point? But yeah, we do that all the time, and it's quite
Woods
good.
Point
you know?
all of a sudden has turned into something, whereas years ago it was like, what is this joint? You
Absolutely.
know?
Yep. And down through Whitehalla or whatever, you know. And there's crews now doing the bike packing, as you call it. So they'll go and do overnight trips, or whatever, and carry these small packs, and it's all riding bikes. It's all good by me, you know.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
So it's quite good. But the best part about it is, you know, mountain biking is alive. It's well. The hard part for the government and the organisation is, how do you measure mountain biking? Well, it's a real tough thing, because, you know, how many people are riding mountain bikes every day? You're never going to know that, because we're riding in the forest with our buddies.
Bunch,
How do you not tax them, but how do you
capitalise on the
on what they're doing and what's going on? That's the challenge for the future, I think. You know, because governments would love to know how many people are riding the Dandenongs, and if they knew, they would fall over backwards how many people are actually riding bikes